And now, without any further delay, let's begin today's webinar, The Role of Collaboration in Healthcare Cybersecurity, sponsored by Redbooth and hosted by Health Data Management. I would like to now introduce your moderator for today. That is Mike Perskowski. Mike, you have the floor.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today. We're glad you could be part of our program in the role of collaboration in healthcare cybersecurity. Once again, I want to acknowledge and thank Redbooth for their sponsorship of this program. We appreciate their support. In our program today, we're fortunate that we're going to have several subject matter experts who are going to lead us through a discussion about the key topics in collaboration in healthcare cybersecurity. First, we'll hear from Dr. Mansur Haseeb, who has a wealth of knowledge in both cybersecurity and health information technology. He's been a chief information officer. He holds a Doctor of Science in cybersecurity, as well as holding a number of prestigious industry certifications. We're very fortunate to have him and his nearly 30 years of experience in healthcare education, biotechnology, energy, and security. We're also fortunate to have Charles Stute, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Redbooth. Charles has over 20 years of experience in marketing, product management, and development leadership roles and in creating high-growth enterprise software and services business. Both Dr. Haseeb and Charles will spend time after their formal presentations answering questions from their audience, as you heard, as many as time allows. Before we get started, I also did want to note that Source Media is going to offer CE credit for this web session, and just a couple of things to keep in mind. To receive the credit, you must be in attendance for the complete session. Source Media is not responsible for late arrivals or connection issues. And you will receive a CEU tracking form and a follow-up email 5 business days after the web seminar to serve as proof of attendance. So with that out of the way, I'd like to now turn our program over to our first featured speaker, Dr. Mansur Haseeb. Dr. Haseeb, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to Redbooth and Health Data Management for making this event possible. Thanks also to all of you from all over the world for joining us today and allowing me to share some thoughts and ideas with you. This slide represents some of the broad topic areas I will cover in today's presentation. Goal is to understand why people are important in cybersecurity and why collaboration, particularly technology-enabled collaboration, is important in cybersecurity. So let's begin by understanding the context. First, this is a list of healthcare organizations which breached 1 million or more records in the recent past. They have been enshrined on the famous Wall of Shame on the Health and Human Services website. Those of you who are in the healthcare space will be familiar with the Health and Human Resources Wall of Shame. 1/3 of the U.S. population's protected information is now in the hands of unauthorized people, possibly even foreign nationals. The issue isn't simply that unauthorized people have access to protected health information. Since unauthorized people gained significant levels of access to systems for prolonged periods of time, the possibility is very high that they changed the data. It is also possible that they planted undetectable backdoors to the system. Thus, the failure to protect healthcare information and data are calling into question the very trustworthiness of the data. This is a serious problem indeed. When we examine the cybersecurity incidents and the statistics in healthcare, we find an interesting story. We see that the vast majority of problems can be traced back to the people within the organization. In other words, it wasn't a failure of technology, but a failure of people. People-related problems can be classified into these 5 categories. Of these, malicious intent is the most difficult to correct. And so when you have people using malicious intent, removal of these people is usually the best option with those people. All the other things can be corrected. So Given the dangers of cybersecurity breach incidents, we may wonder why we should adopt technology in healthcare. There are three primary reasons. First is the safety of human life. We must do something to reduce medical errors, which kill nearly 500,000 Americans annually. The best way to minimize risks and make better human judgment and decisions is through complete patient information and through collaboration and knowledge sharing on a global scale. The second is the reduction of costs. We can reduce travel costs significantly, and we can also increase the speed for doctors and patients to collaborate and communicate. Finally, we can increase access because we can bring doctors to underserved areas, and on a global scale, we can actually provide better care monitoring for patients. Now, as we approach these goals, we have to recognize that increased access and lowered costs of technology have also changed the human social experience and the way we work, live, and play. Many of us no longer go to work, we work from where we are. Our work and personal lives have become intertwined. Technology is allowing global workers to collaborate on a project seamlessly. Typical hierarchical relationships in the workplace are becoming flatter. People are deriving higher social and workplace benefits by sharing their knowledge rather than holding it back. With that backdrop in mind, a quick review of the modern cybersecurity model will help us understand the importance of people and collaboration. Those of you who are familiar with cybersecurity will probably know that cybersecurity has three key goals, and that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality simply means that the right people should have access to information and the wrong people should not. Integrity means that the information should be trustworthy so that it can be relied upon to make decisions. Availability is a measure of the uptime or the safety of the system. Typically, as you can see from this chart, we use three types of tools to meet these goals. They are people, policy, and technology. Because we have limited resources, our cybersecurity strategy rests on three critical pillars. Those are mission, risk, and governance. The arrow in this model signifies the need for improvement over time because cybersecurity is not a state, but a continuously improving process. Notice that except for technology, all other aspects of this model involve people. Even technology involves people because people choose which technology to use and how to configure that technology for use. Therefore, people are the most important aspect of this model and the most important aspect of cybersecurity. Failure to recognize this importance has been the primary reason for weakness in organizational cybersecurity strategy. This is the definition that I have provided for cybersecurity that encapsulates the entire model. And it's basically that cybersecurity is the strategic management of systems and technology which maximizes confidentiality, integrity, and availability using a balanced mix of technology, policy, and people while perennially improving over time. Vision and mission are very important aspects of building an organizational culture because vision and mission unite people around a common purpose. They make work meaningful for people and help people to understand the importance of their work. The lessons from the safety management culture of the aviation industry and the nuclear industry show that collaborative decisions made by multiple people with divergent skills and experiences minimize the risks of the decision. The collective brains of multiple people is a far more powerful resource than the brain of the smartest individual in the group. The importance of people in cybersecurity has been discussed extensively in the research literature. The key point that surfaces time and time again is that leadership engagement of people and the building of a cybersecurity culture is essential for organizations because culture governs behavior. It is the behavior of people which ultimately determines cybersecurity for any organization. So, what influences better cybersecurity behavior? Executive leadership is paramount. The development of the culture of an organization starts at the very top. If the Chief Information Officer of an organization reports to the Chief Executive Officer rather than the Chief Financial Officer, the organization is likely to have better cybersecurity. If the organization takes care of the happiness of its workers through fair pay, employee empowerment, better communication, and collaboration, the organization is also likely to have better cybersecurity. This is because this type of ethical leadership fosters loyalty, productivity, and innovation, all critical components. Without loyalty and innovation, we cannot have cybersecurity. The other critical thing to understand is that everyone handles data and everyone uses technology. It is critical to increase the technical proficiency of people. We also have to ensure that workers in healthcare accept the safety of patient data as their job responsibility. They are already used to the idea of patient safety. Therefore, connecting patient data safety to patient safety makes them understand it better. They don't understand words like cybersecurity. You use those words, you're going to shut down their receptors. And so we need leaders and people to think of a breach as a patient's confidential data as almost the killing of a patient's digital identity. That's how serious it is. Now, in doing this, we need to recognize that people will respond to positive stimulus far better than they will respond to punitive policies. Therefore, the benefits of culture development using positive stimulus are enormous and long-lasting. The compliance culture in the healthcare industry that has existed for all this time has been very expensive and, as we can see, with very dubious results. Most organizations spend so much trying to be compliant that they are unable to spend on things that really matter. The healthcare industry has been approaching cybersecurity with a haphazard compliance approach. You will see on this chart on the left-hand side, I've shown the benefits of compliance or what compliance is. And on the right-hand side, I've shown you culture. And you will see that culture is much, much better. The other thing that has happened is some organizations have simply attempted to transfer the risk to insurance companies without doing much in terms of due diligence. And the results have been highly dubious, as we can see with breach after breach. So the question is, since innovation is so vital to any organization, how are we going to implement it? We must realize that innovation cannot be driven from the top through heavy-handed tactics. That rarely works. The best way to innovate is through micro improvements at every level. that is the Japanese Kaizen concept, whereby people closest to the problem or a function develop micro changes continuously. The compliance approach is exactly the opposite of the collaborative approach. It is like running an organization with the brains of a few anointed people, and we cannot solve insider threats with a heavy-handed compliance approach. Compliance is very static, while culture is very dynamic and exciting. The technology-powered transformation that healthcare has been undergoing right now is quite fascinating. This slide captures some of the things that are going on. And engagement and collaboration, particularly technology-enabled collaboration, is becoming increasingly important as a way to engage more brains for innovation and better risk management. In the healthcare industry, I have written extensively about the people-powered innovation cultures of companies like Kaiser Permanente and the Delaware Health Information Exchange as two examples where this practice has resulted in some dramatic results. Collaboration and communications among doctors, workers, business partners, customers, patients and healthcare providers, members of the family, and various other entities have become extremely important for every healthcare organization. Knowledge is growing at an incredible pace. Collective wisdom and interdisciplinary solutions have become essential. For almost every problem or issue, there is a need for collaboration and communication. Geographically dispersed virtual teams are becoming the norm, and technology facilitates the building of relationships and enables collaboration in a powerful way. For many smaller organizations, implementing technology or cybersecurity on their own is difficult and expensive. Therefore, a nationwide initiative spearheaded by the Department of Homeland Security to create information sharing and analysis organizations is a great initiative. These are like neighborhood watch groups which will enable smaller organizations to solve their technology and cybersecurity problems collectively. The adoption of technology in U.S. healthcare is simply going to grow at an explosive pace. Telemedicine alone is expected to grow 8-fold in the next 5 years. Almost every doctor or nurse is expected to be using mobile devices within a year if they're not doing so already. It is very important, therefore, that we all understand how organizational culture is developed and then use technology to facilitate a better patient safety and patient data safety culture in our healthcare organizations. Culture has these 4 critical elements. First, our values. These are the ideals of the organization. What does the organization stand for? What defines the behavior of every worker in the organization? Second, culture is shaped by the celebration of heroes. These are people who live the values of the organization and are therefore celebrated by the organization as examples to live up to. You will see them displayed on the halls of organizations, pictures, awards, Employee of the Month, and so on and so forth. Third are rituals. These are celebratory parties, award ceremonies, certificates, annual picnics, company dinners, lunches. These are all examples of rituals which help people bond and celebrate the culture of the organization, as well as the achievement of its people. These rituals also serve as positive reinforcement of behavior, which are very important as people respond to positive stimulus much better than negative stimulus. Finally, the presence of the corporate social network is very important for culture. This social network helps new members learn the corporate culture and also helps existing members from deviating from the culture. The social network pulls them back every time someone tries to deviate. The 4 key tools that we use to develop and nurture these cultural elements are collaboration, communication, community building, and leadership engagement at all levels. The benefits of this is simply amazing. Hierarchical organizations tend to be run by the brains of fewer people. They tend to suffer lower productivity and lower levels of innovation and definitely lower levels of allegiance. We may wonder why collaboration makes people more productive and innovative. At the end of the day, we have to remember that we are nothing more than a glob of chemicals. When we do pleasurable things, all kinds of good chemicals are flowing through our body. Positive interaction with others stimulate the brain, even when these interactions are happening through technology. This is why so many people are addicted to social media. On the other hand, pain, stress, and negative conditions cause us to lose at least 30% of our brain capacity. For organizations to be successful long-term, they must have happy workers and customers. The amount of productivity and innovation lost due to lack of engagement and collaboration is simply staggering. We have to recognize that people are the most valuable assets in any organization. The reason is their value grows higher over time. They are also the primary source of productivity, innovation, intellectual capital, and the culture of an organization. Typically, they are also the most critical link to the customer. Therefore, nurturing people and investing in them is absolutely essential for long-term success. The literature on the sources of human productivity shows that there are 4 key elements of human productivity. These are knowledge, attitude, skill, and habit. Interestingly, knowledge and skill, though they are important, attitude and habit have been shown to have the highest impact on human productivity. And this is also the area where organizational leaders can have the greatest impact. There is a saying that people do not leave a job, they leave bad managers. I have heard so many managers lament that they cannot recruit or retain good people because of their financial limitations. In my experience, I've found that while I may need a fair compensation level to hire people, the way to retain them were through non-monetary rewards, not necessarily monetary compensation. Now, interestingly enough, every manager, every leader has an unlimited supply of non-monetary compensation. Collaboration and engagement were the key tools that I used to build teamwork, create culture, and a happy work environment. Through the use of technology, we would have meetings, we would generate contests for new ideas, we would vote on ideas, we would discuss topics, we would manage knowledge, build communities, and facilitate multi-way communications. It is a key method to implement a modern intranet and to practice a new form of management called Management 2.0. There's a whole body of literature on that, which seeks to inspire workers through engagement and collaboration. A researcher named Hofstede pointed out that organizational position, gender, and other barriers can create barriers for in-person collaboration. What is most interesting is that when this collaboration happens through technology, many of the pre-existing social and cultural barriers are removed. I remember a story about a global company where a team from India had been collaborating with a team in the United States. They had a fabulous collaboration and idea generation experience within their corporate collaboration environment. Then one day, they met face to face. And the 24-year-old team leader from India met the 60-year-old team leader from the United States, and the 24-year-old remarked, "Wow, I never realized you were such an experienced and senior person. I would never have argued with you the way I did if I had known that earlier." Because in Indian culture, young people are very deferential to older people. In fact, such deferential lack of collaborative decision-making can be very unhealthy for any company. Before the advent of collaborative decision-making in the airline industry, similar deference to the captain have been known to lead to airplane crashes. The safety culture in the nuclear industry is promoted by empowering everyone to challenge the orders of anyone if they believe the order will diminish the safety of the plant. I observed this firsthand when I worked at a nuclear power plant for 6 years. So, what is the vision for collaboration in the healthcare industry? I see that there are two broad areas. One is at the micro level, which is within the organizations. The other is at the macro level between organizations. At the macro level, the possibilities are literally endless. We have already seen, those of you already in the healthcare industry, that you may be familiar with the National Health Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which has been in existence for several years. However, it is not possible for individual doctor's office or various smaller pharmacies to join this kind of an organization. So one of the things that is happening is that this new kind of collaborative environments, the information sharing and analysis organizations, which is being spearheaded by the Department of Homeland Security, as I said before, this is sprouting all over the country. And what I see is that these collaborations would allow smaller companies to afford better technology and qualified cybersecurity personnel resources, which they cannot afford on their own. I also see the health information exchanges, the health insurance exchanges as possible ways to build communities between the providers as well as the healthcare sector. Of course, the healthcare benefits of this collaboration can be simply amazing. I've heard countless stories where the fact that a doctor had complete patient history allowed them to make better decisions, saving a patient's life. Furthermore, because of artificial intelligence, which can assist a doctor to go through an unbelievable amount of data, they can arrive at a better diagnosis through the technology-driven decisions. Some of the repositories are also allowing public health research to be conducted on these databases. Furthermore, many hospitals are reducing their costs. So, for example, in the Delaware Health Information Exchange, some of the hospitals were incurring costs of like $1.25 per transaction on certain things. As a result of the Health Information Exchange, they were able to reduce that cost to 25 cents. And they're also allowing researchers access to that data for research to improve public health. So literally the possibilities are endless. And now to discuss some technology specifics, before we begin the question-answer segment, I will hand over the discussion to Charles.
Thanks, Mansur. So, I think we've really done a good job here of starting the conversation around the benefits of collaboration in the healthcare industry. And what's always, I find, challenging in having conversations with customers and partners in the healthcare space is that sometimes the concept of open communication seems somewhat incompatible with higher security, right? If you're allowing open communication, how are you also securing that? And I think we've given some really good examples of the benefits of collaboration. And now we can talk about some of the specifics of securing it as well and applying your cybersecurity model. I'll spend a couple of moments just talking about the technology behind Redbooth and how we address some of those challenges. And as you may have inferred, Redbooth is a company that focuses on collaboration and delivering collaboration solutions to the healthcare industry as well as other vertical markets. But we do actually, I think, a lot more than just delivering collaboration solutions. Generally, the questions that we're addressing or the challenges that we're addressing are more fundamental to how organizations operate. Questions like, how am I aligning my team or my department or my entire organization around a common initiative and actually validating that that's in fact the case? Or how, as a team, do we become more productive and essentially accomplish more with a given set of resources? Or how do we track initiatives that are at risk and highlight those or reduce the friction in how we're communicating? If you think about the communication tools that are available to you in your average environment, there's a plethora of modalities today, everything from your traditional telephone and telephony infrastructure to mobile devices and other form factors, as well as video and richer forms of communication. And I think one of the challenges is being able to allow teams to use them in productive ways, because at the end of the day, we're not just communicating for the sake of communicating, we're actually communicating around a shared common objective or purpose or an initiative. And being able to put both the communication capabilities as well as the context and relevancy of those initiatives into the same environment and having them be seamlessly available to users of that environment is really the key to addressing these questions around productivity and reducing the friction around communicating and making it easy, more productive, and more actionable. And that's essentially what Redbooth does. So we realize that there are many different ways of communicating and many different sources of information, from common sources and file share and sync type of applications to enterprise standards like Microsoft SharePoint to electronic health record systems and other sources of content and information within an enterprise. What Redbooth focuses on is pulling all those sources of content together into one environment and interjecting those into the communication capabilities so that users truly have one place that they can go to communicate, collaborate with their coworkers, their teams, and their organization to actually accomplish amazing results around productivity and team alignment and reducing that communications friction. So that's really what we focus on, and we enable teams across a variety of industries, including healthcare, to actually do that. The way we do that, and particularly around the security conversation we're having today in the healthcare space, is around giving our customers flexibility around our tools and technology. So not only, we are certainly a cloud provider, but not only are we a cloud provider, but we're also a private cloud provider. By private cloud, I mean we actually build solutions that enable customers to take collaboration and deploy it inside their own environment so that it's managed and controlled by them, and the data is also protected and controlled and encrypted in their own environment. So we think it's really important as you're considering your cybersecurity imperatives to also look at your infrastructure and where that collaboration infrastructure lives, and certainly giving you control over that environment and allowing you to manage it gives you a higher level of, certainly potentially a higher level of security, assuming that you're following good cybersecurity practices. And we think that's pretty unique in the industry in terms of bringing that collaboration infrastructure into your own environment, enabling you to manage it yourselves. I certainly don't want to take all the time telling you just about our specific technology, because we want this to really be an educational session. But I will say that there are a variety of healthcare and health services providers who use our solutions today to enable their teams to better communicate and collaborate. And you can read more about it here at goredbooth.com/healthcare and learn some representative case studies of how other organizations have deployed collaboration within their teams and made them more productive by doing that, and also solve some really pressing business challenges as well as healthcare challenges in the process. But without further ado, I'll reserve some time so that we can answer some Q&A, because I see we have some good questions here queuing up. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike so we can address the Q&A portion of the session.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Haseeb and Charles. We covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of interesting topics. We do have questions from our audience, so let's get right to them. So first, Dr. Haseeb, first question for you is, what roles do you see EMPI and provider registry solutions playing in cyber solutions for healthcare?
I think that, so first of all, I am not totally familiar with EMPI, so that's maybe one of the things that I will have to research because I'm not exactly certain what EMPI stands for. But registries in general are always good because they help you, I guess, identify who is who. So I really don't know. I don't have a specific answer. Perhaps somebody else might have an answer to that.
Okay, so let's move to the second question now. So this is probably, Dr. Haseeb, we'll start with you, and let's see what Charles has to say as well. So first is, can the increased use of technology increase the risk of errors and malpractice?
Yes, this is a great question. So we have already seen instances of that. Obviously, increased use of technology can make even fraud easier. We've seen people copy and paste. But one of the beautiful things about technology is that technology also keeps a record of what is going on. So even though it happens, it's also much easier to trace back. So for example, I had written an article about even electronic health records versus paper records. When somebody views a paper record in an unauthorized manner, you have no trace. You have no idea who saw it. But when somebody views an electronic record, you know exactly who saw it, for how long they saw it, and from where they saw it. And so you can correct these issues a whole lot better.
Okay, Charles, any your thoughts on that one?
Well, I can't comment specifically to the malpractice aspects of it, but from a general collaboration standpoint, yes, I think that using unsecured forms of communication collaboration technology do create the potential for exposure, and it is important that you're safeguarding all your communication channels, both internally within the healthcare organization as well as, in particular, up to patients, where you're particularly not in control over the ultimate last mile network there to reach them.
Okay, very good. And our earlier questioner has kindly given us the definition of EPMI, which is Enterprise Master Patient Index.
Okay. So yes, if you have other ways, so having, I guess, patient identifiers or alternative forms of patient identification rather than using their protected health information or their social security numbers and those kinds of IDs, I think that would be a much better thing. I personally think that is very much needed. There are organizations that are already doing that.
Okay, next question from our audience. Are there any linkages between the rise in healthcare cyber attacks and the adoption of electronic health records? Is there any correlation between those two trends?
I'm sorry, repeat the question again, please.
Yes, the question is, the audience member wants to know if there are any linkages, any relationships between the rise in healthcare cyber attacks and the adoption of electronic health records.
Well, the linkage is purely coincidental because the thing is that in order to implement electronic health records, so I gave a talk about that, but is it the fault of the electronic health records? No. It's the moment you implement electronic health records, you have to also implement proper cybersecurity techniques. You cannot just rely on technology, and this is why I have analyzed breaches. So there are several webinars and talks that you will find on the internet if you do a Google search of my name, where I have actually discussed some of the breaches and why they happened. For example, the breach at Anthem, 80 million records. That was not due to technology or the fact that you had electronic health records. it was because they didn't even have very simple things like encryption, number one. Number two, the view as to who is accessing the data for how long. So many hospitals where if a doctor actually looks at 3 patients' records, all kinds of alarm bells go off. But in Anthem's case, somebody was able to suck out 80 million records and no alarm bells went off, and it was only that the person whose user ID was used to access those records, he had found that, okay, his ID had been used at a time that he wasn't familiar with. So there needs to be all kinds of controls there. So that's the whole business of governance and leadership, because you cannot have cybersecurity without, number one, the governance, leadership, and the innovation, continuous improvement, continuous monitoring of your situation, of your status.
Okay, very good. Charles, question for you. What is the suggested onboarding process for collaboration software within a large healthcare organization? What do you do with your clients to facilitate onboarding?
Well, that's a good question, because collaboration, in general, is somewhat of, there's obviously a human and behavioral aspect to it as well. I mean, it's one thing to deploy the technology; it's another thing to actually get people to use it and embrace it, and that human factor comes into play. So generally what we do, and this is not necessarily specific to healthcare, but across a variety of industries, is that we work with our customers to help them find what are the specific communication challenges today that cause the most friction. In other words, what is the most intensive process that you have that involves communications or your collaboration infrastructure that you might be using emails to solve today, or phone calls, or some of the communication modality. And generally it's a process that involves a fair amount of handoffs back and forth between different participants. Maybe there's approvals involved in it. But we look at actually from a sort of a process standpoint, what are those things that are very long-lived, just sort of workflows or processes, and that involve a fair amount of back and forth communications. And those are generally the items to highlight first and to implement first, because one, they provide the biggest bang for the buck, and two, they generally provide the most opportunity to actually reach the largest number of folks in the organization and actually bring them in, on board to the collaboration infrastructure and have them embrace that technology and see a positive change that comes out of it.
Okay, this is an interesting question. It requires a lot of thinking, because it involves sort of the unknown here. So Dr. Haseeb, our audience member wants to know, how could some of the most serious healthcare data hacks from the past year, and you identified a bunch of them in your presentation, how could some of these have been prevented?
Okay, so yes, so the key thing was that the people aspects, the collaboration aspects were basically ignored. Okay, in the healthcare industry, one of the biggest problems with the healthcare industry is that half of healthcare industry still runs their information technology and cybersecurity through their chief financial officer organization. Now, when you do that, this whole thing of many people view cybersecurity as an expense and a cost center, and a typical chief financial officer thinks that way. That's just the way they think. And the problem is that the right people are not hired when you have that situation. First of all, even if the organization has a chief information officer, that chief information officer reporting to chief financial officer is not really a chief financial officer. I mean, chief information officer, because the person isn't empowered. First of all, they will make about half the salary of these chief financial officers. You're going to get a completely different kind of executive. They're always going to be not empowered to do the right thing. So, for example, I have seen cases where an actual chief information officer reporting to a CFO went to the officer and said, okay, we need to do encryption, and here's what it's going to cost. The first question was, how many servers are you going to need? So the person said 4. and the chief financial officer says, well, can you do it with 2? Can you do it with 1? And you see, that's the kind of conversation that it suddenly comes down to. So the right thing almost never gets done. And this is one of the research findings that I found when I did my doctoral research and I did a national study on this. I found that 50% of U.S. healthcare, their cybersecurity and IT is being run by the chief financial officer, the administrative officer, anybody but the chief information officer. Anthem's organizational chart is also messed up the same way. So that's the first thing. We have to fix the organization. The right people have to be hired, and the right people have to be empowered. The other thing is that the risk analysis. So right now, cybersecurity risk has become the risk of the organization. Yet, because many of the CEOs come from very finance background, this has not been part of their MBA training usually, because most MBA programs in the United States today do not cover enough IT and cybersecurity curriculum. And so without that, they don't even include that in the risk analysis. And they are usually blaming technology, blaming hackers in China or whatever, but they're failing to understand that they themselves have never innovated and they have not improved, they have not adopted technology or set up the decisions. So even if the technology gives you information, this didn't happen necessarily in the healthcare space, but in the case of Target, for example, the technology told them that something was going on, but for 45 days, nobody did anything with the decision. Nobody did anything with that information. So that kind of thing is going on. So it is very important that even if the right technology is implemented, the right governance and the people and the collaborative environment needs to exist so that the right analysis of risk is done and you can see what's going on. So we have to engage people. That's the key.
So Charles, here's a follow-up question that dovetails pretty nicely on what Dr. Haseeb was talking about, who's making the decision, right? So what are some of the best ways to get buy-in from key decision makers for adopting collaboration software? Obviously, when Redbooth is talking to your clients and you get people excited about what your product can do for them, what are some of the best arguments they can make to whether it's the CFO or the CEO or whoever the purchasing gatekeepers need to be about getting buy-in for that?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to what are the problems that you're trying to solve, because generally you can very quickly map sort of an ROI that's based on those particular problems. So as an example, if I go back to sort of some of the points I mentioned earlier, teams who have productivity challenges, a lot of times we find that lots of teams have been using email and content embedded in email to actually manage processes. And if you think about email and the role of email in an organization, it's not a workflow tool, it's not a process management system, but a lot of times it's actually used for that. So one of the biggest bangs for the buck we find is that when you look at how you're using email, and in particular, how you're using email distribution lists to maintain conversations and manage discussion threads, things like that. A lot of times those distribution lists are very representative of either a cross-functional or functional team that generally has a collaboration challenge and is generally using email to manage that. And so we find that's actually one of the places that you can look for some very quick wins that will actually help really justify, from a financial sense, the ROI around investing in collaboration technology. There's a lot of course, soft benefits in terms of, well, if a team is aligned around a common initiative and it's all visible to them, are they more productive, and, of course, and happier, et cetera. But I think in terms of real hard numbers that where you can drive real benefits that a CFO would resonate with, it's looking at those opportunities or processes today that are actually very email intensive, because that's generally one where we find sometimes teams are spending upwards of 50% of their time actually managing their workday and managing processes and activities from email, and spending another significant portion of their time actually looking for that information in email or having some status meeting around that. So that's really where we encourage a lot of teams to look for those justifications.
Okay, we've got time for just about 2 more questions here. Dr. Haseeb, this is a good one for you. This is very to the point. Our audience member wants to know, you haven't mentioned HIPAA compliance specifically in handling of healthcare records for small companies to maintain cybersecurity. For a small consulting company, what would be the best approach to maintain patient confidentiality?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Affording the right technology as well as the right expertise for small companies, small businesses all across America has been a difficult challenge, not just in healthcare, but in any industry. So this is the main reason why the Department of Homeland Security is starting this information sharing and analysis organizations. As I mentioned, these are going to be like small cooperatives, think of it as neighborhood watch groups. So these small businesses within a community, so even within a city or within a state, can get together and collaboratively form these information sharing and analysis organizations. Now they can pool their resources, and now it is better for them as a collective to afford the right talent, the right advice to help them not just with HIPAA compliance, but just in keeping up with technology, also learning how to use the technology properly, everything. I mean, so HIPAA compliance is one aspect, but literally forming these cooperatives, I personally am a big favor of that. When I saw that initiative, I was very excited. I said, wow, this is a great way to solve the problem, because the funny thing is we hear about these major breaches, but a lot of the smaller companies that are really getting hammered all across America, that is flying under the radar because many of them don't even make the news because they're just too small, because the media usually focuses on the sensational breaches of thousands and millions of records. So that's what I see.
Okay, and Charles, last question here for you. This is probably a good way to finish it up on the intersection between technology and people and organizational behavior. How can organizations hedge against the risk of employees sharing sensitive data from their non-secure personal devices?
Well, good question. So obviously, from a technology standpoint, there are various methods you can use to encrypt data on the device, whether you look at a mobile device management solution. That would be one way, of course. Obviously, from a collaboration standpoint, specifically, I think you want to talk to your technology providers to ensure that both data at rest as well as data in motion is encrypted. And I think that's probably not always necessarily a common standard for every collaboration technology that you could potentially use. And a key part of that, of course, is thinking about, are you giving your employees the tools and technologies that enable them to do that, or are they going outside of the corporate IT process and using their own solutions? As an example, do you want them using a consumer IM platform because they happen to like it better and it's easier to use than what you might have as a corporate standard? Or if you don't have a corporate standard, are they using that? Similarly, are they using their own preferred file share and sync platform rather than what might be your corporate standard? Because that obviously is creating holes and risk that you aren't even aware of, and that's, I think, one of the issues that keeps a lot of CIOs up at night. Is how you actually stop that usage. And of course, you can do it with technology, but you also need to do it with behavior. So if you're not giving your employees the technology that they want, that makes their lives easier and is delightful to use, then you're just naturally leaving them to look for those consumer solutions that deliver a better experience. So I think that's a dialogue that you have to have, but it's an important one to have so that you're actually enabling your employees to both do the right thing as well as to be productive at the same time.
Okay, and with that, we're going to wrap up our program for today. I want to take time to thank our speakers for their presentations and for answering many of your questions today. Dr. Mansur Haseeb and Charles Stute, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. Once again, want to acknowledge and thank Redbooth for sponsoring this program today. We do appreciate their support. Last and not least, we want to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. We hope that you'll join us for a future program brought to you from Health Data Management. So thank you once again for joining us. I'm Mike Perkowski. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you very much.